"We're pulling the plug on Maya's initiative," Blake announced, his voice cutting through the conference room like a blade. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. I stood frozen at the presentation screen, my PowerPoint still displaying projected revenue growth, 42% by year-end. The same executives who had been nodding enthusiastically just moments before suddenly found their notebooks fascinating. Blake adjusted his expensive watch, flashing that practiced smile he reserved for moments when he crushed someone's dreams. "We're redirecting resources to a more strategic opportunity," he continued, gesturing toward a glossy proposal I'd never seen before. His proposal. My 6 months of work vanished in an instant, erased like it never existed. I didn't argue. I simply closed my laptop with steady hands, though my heart was racing. But my silence wasn't defeat. It was preparation. The room felt suffocating as Blake continued outlining his vision, using corporate buzzwords that meant nothing. I watched the faces around the table. People I'd worked with for years, people who knew the quality of my research. They sat there like mannequins, nodding at appropriate intervals while my professional reputation crumbled before their eyes. The CFO, who'd personally praised my financial projections just last week, wouldn't even glance my direction. I gathered my materials slowly, deliberately, maintaining eye contact with each person as I walked toward the door. Let them remember this moment when everything unraveled. Outside the conference room, colleagues avoided eye contact. The kind of awkward sympathy that feels more like pity. I heard someone whisper behind me. "She handled that better than expected." Better. As if I'd just lost a parking spot, not half a year of my professional life. I walked calmly to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back had just been publicly humiliated by her supervisor mid-presentation. No tears came. Just a cold clarity settling over me like armor. I straightened my blazer and returned to my desk. Everyone expected me to be broken. That was their first mistake. The office buzzed with uncomfortable energy. People pretended to focus on their screens while stealing glances at me, waiting for the emotional breakdown they'd all witnessed before when Blake destroyed careers. Some looked genuinely sorry, others seemed relieved it wasn't them facing his wrath. I could feel their collective held breath, expecting me to storm out, cry, or make a scene that would give them gossip for weeks. Instead, I opened my laptop and began typing my daily reports as if nothing had happened. The normalcy unsettled them more than tears would have. Good. Unpredictability was going to be my greatest asset. My name is Maya Chen, and I've worked as a senior marketing strategist at Brightwave Technologies for 4 years. We're a growing software company in Austin that specializes in business automation tools. I'm the employee who never missed deadlines, never took undeserved credit, and always stayed late when crises hit. The type that ambitious managers love to guide, until your success starts threatening their position. Blake Rodriguez had been my supervisor for 2 years, and I'd watched him climb the corporate ladder by taking credit for his team's innovations. Today he'd graduated from stealing credit to stealing entire projects. Brightwave prided itself on innovation and employee empowerment, at least according to the glossy brochures in our lobby. The reality was different. Success here required navigating an intricate web of office politics, where the loudest voice often won regardless of merit. I'd spent 4 years mastering this environment, building relationships across departments, and establishing myself as someone reliable and competent. Blake had initially seemed like an ally, someone who recognized talent and fostered growth. I'd been naive to trust him. Now I understood that every piece of advice he'd given me, every mentoring session, had been intelligence gathering. He'd been studying my methods, learning my strengths, preparing to eventually replace me with himself. My canceled project was called StreamSync, a customer onboarding platform that would revolutionize how small businesses integrated our software. I'd spent months researching user pain points, conducting interviews, and building detailed wireframes. The preliminary testing showed incredible results. 67% reduction in onboarding time, and 89% customer satisfaction rates. When I presented the early data, the VP of product called it the most promising user experience innovation we've seen in years. The CEO himself had sent me a congratulatory email. 2 weeks later, Blake started scheduling private meetings with the development team. Red flags everywhere, but I trusted the system would protect good work. The research phase had been exhausting but exhilarating. I'd personally interviewed over 200 small business owners, spending hours understanding their frustrations with our current onboarding process. Late nights were spent analyzing user journey maps, identifying friction points, and designing elegant solutions. I'd built prototypes in my spare time, testing different approaches until I found the perfect balance of simplicity and functionality. The breakthrough came during a 3 a.m. coding session when I finally cracked the integration challenge that had stumped our developers for months. That moment of clarity felt like winning the lottery. I'd created something genuinely valuable, something that would help thousands of businesses while generating significant revenue for Brightwave. Blake's betrayal wasn't just professional, it was personal, because he'd stolen something I'd poured my heart into. 3 weeks after my cancellation, a company-wide email landed in everyone's inbox. Brightwave announces new Quick Start initiative, spearheaded by Blake Rodriguez. Quick Start. My research, my user interviews, my wireframes, repackaged under a different name. He hadn't stolen my work exactly. He'd rebranded it and positioned himself as the visionary behind the concept. The worst part wasn't the theft. It was watching colleagues congratulate him on his brilliant idea, while I sat 10 feet away invisible. He'd executed the perfect corporate heist in broad daylight. The email included mock-ups that looked suspiciously similar to my original designs, just with different color schemes and fonts. Blake had even adopted my specific terminology, phrases I'd carefully crafted during user research sessions. Reading his description of the innovative user-centric approach made my stomach turn. He'd lifted entire paragraphs from my proposal, barely bothering to change the sentence structure. The most infuriating part was his bio at the bottom, highlighting his passion for user experience innovation and track record of breakthrough product development. It was like watching someone wear your clothes while claiming they'd designed them. The congratulatory responses started flowing immediately. Executives praised his strategic thinking and deep understanding of customer needs. I wanted to scream that every insight he was claiming came from my months of painstaking research. Sleep became impossible after that. I'd replay his presentation in my head, watching him use my exact phrases: streamlined user journey and friction-free onboarding experience. Terms I'd coined during my research. Blake had said it wasn't personal, just business strategy. Maybe for him. But for me, it represented everything I'd built being erased from existence. Still, I maintained my composure at work. Smiled in meetings. Participated in team discussions. Because I understood something Blake didn't. Patience is the most powerful weapon in corporate warfare. And my degree wasn't in marketing, it was in business analytics with a focus on financial auditing. My academic background had taught me to see patterns others missed, to follow money trails that revealed hidden truths. While my colleagues focused on creative campaigns and brand messaging, I understood the financial mechanics that drove corporate decisions. This dual perspective had made me valuable. I could create compelling marketing strategies while ensuring they made fiscal sense. Blake knew about my marketing skills, but had no idea about my analytical training. That oversight would cost him everything. I'd spent 2 years quietly observing how he operated, learning his weaknesses and blind spots. He was brilliant at self-promotion but terrible at details. He could sell a vision but couldn't execute it. Most importantly, he had a pattern of cutting corners when he thought no one was watching. I'd covered for him before, smoothing over budget discrepancies and timeline failures. Not anymore. Every quarter, our department compiled budget reports for senior leadership. Blake's Quick Start was burning through allocated funds faster than projected. I noticed irregularities, expenses labeled, user research consulting, with no vendor documentation attached. It wasn't outright fraud yet. Just sloppy financial management waiting to become a bigger problem. So I started documenting everything. Quietly. Methodically. The way I'd been trained to track financial discrepancies. My forensic accounting training kicked in like muscle memory. I created detailed spreadsheets tracking every expense, noting dates, amounts, and supposed purposes. Blake's spending patterns revealed a troubling trend. Large payments to vendors with vague descriptions and no deliverable documentation. He was either incredibly careless with company money or intentionally obscuring how funds were being used. Either way, it violated Brightwave's financial policies. I began cross-referencing expenses with project timelines, looking for inconsistencies. What I found was a web of questionable transactions that would make any auditor's pulse quicken. The beauty of financial forensics is that numbers don't lie. They leave trails that lead inevitably to the truth. Blake had handed me the weapon I needed to destroy him. I just had to be patient enough to let him finish loading it for me. I reconnected with Alex from finance. We'd started at Brightwave the same week 4 years ago, back when Blake was just another team lead instead of a department director. I mentioned needing vendor receipts for a quarterly expenditure analysis I was preparing. Alex didn't ask questions. We'd always had each other's backs. By Friday, a comprehensive folder of quick start expenses sat in my inbox. What I discovered made my pulse quicken with anticipation. Alex and I had maintained our friendship despite working in different departments. We'd shared coffee breaks, complained about office politics, and celebrated each other's promotions over the years. Alex had watched Blake's rise with the same skepticism I felt, having witnessed firsthand how he operated during budget meetings. When I reached out for help, Alex understood immediately without needing explicit details. The file that arrived contained months of detailed financial records, invoices, payment authorizations, and vendor contracts. Everything was meticulously organized, a testament to Alex's professional thoroughness. As I scrolled through the documents, patterns emerged that painted a damning picture of Blake's financial management. The evidence was even more extensive than I'd hoped. Alex had included notes highlighting particularly questionable transactions, clearly sharing my suspicions about Blake's activities. This wasn't just friendship. It was professional duty to protect the company from financial mismanagement. Blake had been funneling money intended for user research to a consulting firm that specialized in executive coaching and personal branding. Over $200,000 had disappeared into services that had nothing to do with product development. The audacity was almost impressive. He was using company funds to boost his own career, while my project gathered dust in some forgotten server folder. But I didn't rush to expose him. Premature revelation would make me look vindictive and petty. I needed perfect timing and ironclad evidence. The consulting firm's website revealed the scope of Blake's deception. They offered executive presence coaching, personal brand development, and leadership storytelling workshops. Services designed to help ambitious professionals climb corporate ladders. Invoice descriptions used vague language like strategic consultation and market research analysis, but the dates corresponded perfectly with Blake's increasingly polished presentations and growing confidence in executive meetings. He'd essentially been using company money to fund his own professional development, while claiming it was essential project research. The most galling part was seeing invoices for media training and public speaking coaching, explaining his sudden transformation from nervous middle manager to confident department director. He'd literally bought the skills he was using to steal credit for my work. I photocopied everything, creating backup files stored in multiple locations. This evidence would be explosive when deployed correctly, but timing was crucial. I needed Blake to feel completely secure in his theft before pulling the trigger. I continued working as if nothing had changed. Attended his team meetings. Contributed to discussions about QuickStart's progress. I even sent him a congratulatory note when TechCrunch featured the project in an article about innovative onboarding solutions. He believed I'd moved on and accepted his victory. That assumption would destroy him. Blake's confidence grew daily as he received praise for his innovation. He started speaking at industry conferences, sharing insights about user experience design that came directly from my research notes. Watching him present my work to audiences who hung on his every word was torture, but I maintained my poker face. During team meetings, I offered suggestions and feedback, as if I were genuinely invested in QuickStart's success. Blake seemed genuinely surprised by my professionalism, probably expecting me to sabotage the project out of spite. Instead, I helped solve technical problems and contributed to strategy discussions. My colleagues began viewing me as mature and team-focused, someone who put company interests above personal grievances. This reputation would be crucial when the truth eventually emerged. Blake's guard dropped completely as weeks passed without incident. He even started treating me like a trusted advisor again, asking for my input on future projects. The irony was delicious. He was consulting the very person who would orchestrate his downfall. Brightwave has a strict policy. Any project exceeding budget by 20% triggers an automatic financial review. Quickstart was currently at 18% over budget. I waited for the right moment, then submitted a routine budget variance report that included updated market rates for user research consulting. The new calculations pushed Quickstart to 22% over budget. Automatic review triggered. No human bias. No accusations. Just policy enforcement. The beauty of this approach was its complete legitimacy. My budget variance report was a standard quarterly document that finance teams relied on for accurate cost projections. I'd been producing these reports for years, and they were always well-researched and thorough. The updated market rates I included were absolutely accurate. I'd spent hours researching current industry standards for user experience consulting. Blake's expenses were genuinely inflated compared to market norms, making my adjustments completely justifiable. The report highlighted cost discrepancies across multiple vendor categories, with Quickstart being just one of several projects reviewed. This comprehensive approach made it impossible for anyone to claim I was targeting Blake specifically. When the automated review triggered, it would appear as a routine policy response to budget variance, not a personal vendetta. The system would do my work for me, investigating Blake's financial management without any need for me to make accusations or appear vindictive. Sometimes the most elegant revenge comes from simply ensuring the rules are followed properly. The notification email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Financial review scheduled for Quickstart Initiative expenditures, Q2, Q3. Blake's reaction was immediate and visible. Face flushed, voice raised, snapping at anyone who approached his office. He stormed over to my cubicle that afternoon, barely controlling his anger. "Did you have anything to do with this review?" I looked up from my computer with genuine confusion. "With what review?" The silence stretched between us. I watched realization dawn in his eyes as he noticed my slight smile. Blake's paranoia was palpable as he hovered over my desk, searching my expression for signs of guilt or satisfaction. I maintained perfect composure, genuinely puzzled by his aggressive tone. Around us, colleagues stopped working to observe the confrontation, sensing drama but not understanding its source. Blake's reputation for calm professionalism evaporated as his voice rose and his composure cracked. He looked like a man caught in a trap he couldn't see, frantically searching for the mechanism that would spring it. My innocent confusion only amplified his panic because he couldn't prove I'd done anything wrong. The quarterly budget variance report was sitting openly on my desk. A routine document I'd produced dozens of times before. His inability to articulate specific accusations without revealing his own guilty knowledge made him appear unstable and paranoid. Witnesses would remember this moment as Blake's first public display of erratic behavior, not as evidence of my involvement in his downfall. Word spread quickly through the office. Department heads became cautious around Blake. His network of allies, people who'd benefited from his previous successes, started maintaining careful distance. I wasn't celebrating yet. This wasn't about watching him fall. It was about exposing the system that allowed people like him to thrive by stealing from others. The office ecosystem shifted subtly but noticeably. Blake's lunch invitations went unanswered. His casual drop-ins to other departments met with polite but cool receptions. People who'd been eager to associate with his rising star suddenly had pressing deadlines whenever he approached. The corporate instinct for self-preservation kicked in as everyone sensed potential scandal brewing around Quickstart. Blake tried maintaining his usual confidence, but cracks showed in his interactions. He second-guessed decisions he would have made instinctively before, seeking validation from colleagues who no longer offered it freely. The isolation was subtle but devastating for someone whose power depended on relationship networks and influence. I watched this social decay with scientific interest, taking notes on how quickly corporate alliances dissolved when reputation came under threat. Blake had taught me that success in business wasn't just about good work. It was about perception management. Now I was watching him lose control of the very perceptions he'd spent years cultivating. While the finance team investigated QuickStart, I quietly resubmitted StreamSync through our innovation pipeline. I'd refined the proposal, strengthened the business case, and partnered with an external UX consultancy for additional credibility. I used every political lesson Blake had taught me about corporate navigation. The difference was I was using those skills to promote genuine innovation instead of personal advancement. The resubmission process required careful strategy. I couldn't simply resurrect my original proposal. That would appear vindictive and opportunistic. Instead, I enhanced every aspect of the project, incorporating lessons learned during the months since its cancellation. The new business case included additional market research, refined financial projections, and risk mitigation strategies that addressed every concern raised during the original review. I partnered with Cloud Sync UX, a respected consultancy that would add external validation to my proposal. Their involvement signaled that StreamSync had genuine industry support, not just internal advocacy. The timing was crucial. Submitting too early would seem like I was capitalizing on Blake's troubles, while waiting too long might miss the window of opportunity. I chose to file the proposal through the Innovation Committee, rather than through Blake's department, ensuring it would receive fresh eyes without the baggage of our previous conflict. Every detail was calculated to maximize StreamSync's chances while minimizing any appearance of personal motivation. 2 months later, an internal memo circulated. QuickStart initiative under financial review. Development timeline suspended pending investigation results. That same week, the Innovation Committee flagged StreamSync for executive presentation. My original project was rising from the ashes while his crumbled under scrutiny. The memo's clinical language couldn't hide the magnitude of Blake's crisis. Suspended pending investigation was corporate speak for, we found serious problems. The timing was perfect. As Blake's star fell, mine was ascending through legitimate channels. The Innovation Committee had reviewed StreamSync without knowing about my history with Blake or QuickStart, evaluating it purely on its merits. Their enthusiasm was genuine, based on the proposal's technical soundness and market potential. This gave me powerful ammunition against any future claims that my success was built on Blake's failure rather than my own competence. The executive presentation invitation represented a complete reversal of fortune. 6 months after being humiliated in a boardroom, I was being invited back to present to the same audience. The symmetry was poetic, but more importantly, it was strategic. I would return to that room not as someone seeking revenge, but as someone offering solutions. The contrast between my professionalism and Blake's implosion would be obvious to everyone present. The VP of Product called me into her office. Maya, I've reviewed your StreamSync resubmission. The concept seems familiar from earlier this year. Yes, I replied carefully. I originally proposed it before the department restructuring. I've spent the intervening months strengthening the business case and user research foundation. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Smart approach. The conversation felt like a chess match where both players understood more than they were saying. The VP clearly remembered the original StreamSync presentation and Blake's subsequent cancellation of the project. Her careful phrasing suggested she was aware of the politics involved, but needed to navigate them diplomatically. My response acknowledged the history while positioning my resubmission as professional development rather than corporate gamesmanship. The months I'd spent genuinely improving the proposal paid off. I could honestly claim the new version was substantially better than the original. Her approval wasn't just professional courtesy. It was recognition that good ideas deserved second chances regardless of political interference. The smart approach comment carried multiple meanings. She was praising both my project enhancement and my strategic patience in waiting for the right moment to resurrect it. This conversation established her as an ally who understood the realities of corporate politics while maintaining commitment to innovation and merit-based decision-making. The financial review concluded with damning results. Blake's consulting expenses were flagged as non-compliant with project objectives. The investigation revealed systematic misuse of allocated resources. His authority was suspended pending a formal investigation. He tried shifting blame to team members, but the paper trail was crystal clear. Every expense had his digital signature. The beautiful irony? The financial tracking systems that exposed him were based on protocols I'd helped implement the previous year. The investigation report read like a forensic accounting textbook case study in financial misconduct. Blake's attempts to deflect responsibility onto subordinates collapsed under scrutiny. Every questionable transaction required director-level approval, and his digital signatures were embedded throughout the documentation. The finance team had traced the consulting payments to their ultimate destinations, revealing the personal branding services Blake had purchased with company funds. His explanations became increasingly desperate as investigators pressed for details about project deliverables that didn't exist. The irony ran deeper than just the tracking systems. I'd actually been the one who recommended implementing stronger vendor verification protocols after discovering minor discrepancies in another department's budget. Blake had supported my recommendation enthusiastically, never imagining those same systems would eventually expose his own misconduct. The investigation revealed patterns of behavior stretching back months, suggesting this wasn't an isolated incident, but a systematic approach to using company resources for personal advancement. Blake's reputation for financial acumen, built partly on my uncredited work, crumbled as his true competence became apparent. He confronted me in the parking garage one evening, his composure finally cracking. "You think you've won? They'll realize you orchestrated this whole thing and fire you next." I met his gaze steadily. "I didn't orchestrate anything, Blake. I just stopped covering for your mistakes." He went silent because we both knew it was true. How many times had I quietly fixed his errors or filled gaps in his knowledge? I'd been protecting him without realizing it. The parking garage confrontation felt like a scene from a thriller, complete with harsh fluorescent lighting and the echo of our voices off concrete walls. Blake looked haggard, his usual polished appearance replaced by stubble and wrinkled clothes. The stress of investigation and social isolation had taken its toll. His accusation carried the desperation of someone who knew they were cornered, but couldn't accept responsibility for their situation. My response cut deeper than any elaborate revenge scheme could have. It reminded him that his success had always depended on other people's work and cleanup efforts. The silence that followed was filled with years of suppressed resentment and recognition. Blake's face cycled through anger, denial, and finally a grudging acknowledgement of truth. He'd built his career on a foundation of borrowed competence and stolen credit, never developing the skills necessary to succeed independently. Our relationship had been symbiotic in the worst way. I'd provided substance while he provided visibility, but only he had benefited from the arrangement. Now that support system was gone, his weaknesses were exposed for everyone to see. 2 weeks later, Brightwave issued a company-wide announcement. Quick Start Initiative discontinued due to financial irregularities. Leadership restructuring in Product Development Division. Blake was placed on indefinite administrative leave. The consulting firm he'd hired returned the remaining funds to avoid legal action. But the story wasn't finished. The announcement's corporate language masked the magnitude of Blake's fall from grace. Financial irregularities sounded almost clinical, but everyone understood it meant serious misconduct had been discovered. The consulting firm's decision to return funds suggested they were distancing themselves from potential scandal, probably after their lawyers advised them about their exposure to fraud charges. Blake's administrative leave was the corporate equivalent of exile. He kept his title and salary temporarily, but lost all authority and access to company resources. The leadership restructuring phrase indicated that Blake's position would be permanently eliminated, not just temporarily reassigned. Around the office, people spoke in hushed tones about what they'd witnessed, sharing stories about Blake's behavior that suddenly made sense in light of recent revelations. The narrative of his rise and fall was being rewritten in real time, with former admirers now claiming they'd always suspected something was wrong. His absence from the office felt like a weight had been lifted. Meetings were more collaborative, decisions were made more efficiently, and the atmosphere of fear and competition he'd fostered began to dissipate. The following Monday, another email appeared. Brightwave announces StreamSync initiative, led by Maya Chen, newly appointed Director of User Experience Innovation. The same project Blake had killed. The same executives who'd praised his vision were now championing mine. I'd inherited his position and his team. I watched through my office window as security escorted him to the parking lot for the final time. The promotion announcement felt surreal after months of careful planning and patient waiting. Director of User Experience Innovation. A title that perfectly captured everything I'd been working toward throughout my career. The executive team's enthusiasm for StreamSync was genuine and untainted by the Blake scandal, since they were evaluating the project on its own merits. Blake's former team members approached me with a mixture of relief and apprehension, unsure how I would handle the transition of power. Many admitted they'd felt uncomfortable with his leadership style, but hadn't known how to address their concerns. The office Blake had occupied for 2 years now belonged to me, complete with the awards and recognition he'd accumulated through other people's work. Cleaning out his personal belongings felt like an archaeological dig through a career built on false foundations. The view from his window, my window now, included the parking lot where security was loading his desk contents into boxes. The symbolism was perfect. The person who'd tried to destroy my career was literally being escorted away, while I stepped into the role he'd abused. The final investigation report went to the board of directors. Blake's strategic resource mismanagement was cited as causing nearly $400,000 in wasted development funds. His stock options were revoked. His severance package eliminated. The man who'd built his career on claiming credit for others' work had finally run out of people to exploit. The board's response was swift and brutal. Blake's stock options, worth potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, disappeared overnight. His severance package, which would have provided financial cushioning during a job search, was eliminated due to the termination being for cause. The $400,000 figure represented only the direct costs of his misconduct. It didn't include opportunity costs, damaged relationships, or the time wasted on his fraudulent initiatives. Industry connections that Blake had cultivated over years evaporated as word spread about his termination. The tech community in Austin was small enough that his reputation would follow him to any potential employer. LinkedIn posts celebrating his previous achievements disappeared as former colleagues distanced themselves from the scandal. The man who'd built his entire professional identity on taking credit for innovative work now faced the prospect of explaining why his most recent innovation had collapsed under investigation. His network of mentor and admirers scattered like fair-weather friends, leaving him professionally isolated and unemployable in his chosen field. The complete destruction of his career prospects was far more thorough than any revenge I could have planned. StreamSync launched successfully under my leadership. Within 4 months, it exceeded all projected metrics. Customer onboarding time dropped by 71%, and satisfaction scores hit company records. More importantly, it created real value for our clients. Small businesses that had struggled with our complex setup process were now implementing our software in days instead of weeks. I mentored junior team members, teaching them not just about user experience design, but about navigating corporate politics with integrity. The project's success validated every hour I'd invested in research and development. Customer testimonials poured in from small business owners who described StreamSync as life-changing and exactly what we needed. Revenue projections were exceeded by 23% in the first quarter alone, making StreamSync one of Brightwave's most profitable product launches in company history. The technical team that had worked on Blake's version embraced the changes I implemented, admitting they'd had concerns about his approach, but felt unable to voice them previously. My leadership style emphasized collaboration over competition, encouraging team members to share ideas and take ownership of their contributions. The mentoring relationships I developed weren't just about technical skills. I taught emerging professionals how to protect their work, document their contributions, and build alliances that would support their career growth. Many of these young employees had witnessed Blake's treatment of me and understood the importance of learning to navigate corporate politics defensively. StreamSync became more than just a successful product. It became a model for how innovation could flourish when good ideas were protected and nurtured by ethical leadership. People occasionally ask if I did it for revenge. I didn't. I did it to prove that quiet determination can overcome loud manipulation, that patience and preparation can defeat office politics and stolen credit, that justice, when executed properly, doesn't require drama or public confrontation. As I signed the final approval for StreamSync's full rollout, I remembered Blake's words from that fateful conference room. "We're pulling the plug on Maya's initiative." I smiled as I submitted the project completion report. The question about revenge came up regularly during interviews and industry panels where I spoke about StreamSync's development. My standard response focused on professional principles rather than personal satisfaction, though the truth contained elements of both. The real motivation had been proving that merit could triumph over manipulation when combined with strategic thinking and patience. Blake's downfall wasn't my primary goal. It was simply the inevitable consequence of his own choices and incompetence. The most satisfying aspect wasn't watching him fail, but seeing genuine innovation succeed despite attempts to suppress it. StreamSync's success sent a message throughout Brightwave that good work would eventually be recognized and rewarded, even if it faced temporary setbacks due to politics. Younger employees began approaching me with their own stories of stolen credit and suppressed ideas, seeking advice on how to protect their work and advance their careers ethically. The cultural change extended beyond my department as other managers began scrutinizing their own practices and relationship with subordinates. Blake's fall became a cautionary tale about the ultimate futility of building success on other people's foundations. 6 months after that humiliating presentation, I sat in the same conference room, but this time at the head of the table. The executives who'd watched my original project die were now celebrating its success under my leadership. Blake's name had been quietly removed from company directories. His LinkedIn profile listed him as seeking new opportunities. Meanwhile, StreamSync was being featured in industry publications as a breakthrough in user experience design. The irony was perfect. He'd tried to bury my work to elevate himself, but his own incompetence had buried him instead. The conference room had been completely reconfigured since my humiliation 6 months earlier. New furniture, updated technology, and a different energy that reflected Brightwave's renewed focus on innovation and ethical leadership. Sitting at the head of the table felt like claiming my rightful place in a story that had always been mine to tell. The same executives who'd avoided eye contact during my cancellation now hung on my every word, seeking insights about user experience trends and market opportunities. Their enthusiasm wasn't just about StreamSync's success. It was about being associated with a winner after the embarrassment of the Blake scandal. Industry recognition for StreamSync included mentions in TechCrunch, Wired, and Harvard Business Review, establishing me as a thought leader in user experience design. Speaking engagements and consulting opportunities multiplied as other companies sought to replicate our success. Blake's LinkedIn profile updates became increasingly desperate, networking posts about exciting new ventures and exploring opportunities that fooled no one in our industry. The contrast between our trajectories was stark and public, serving as a powerful reminder that sustainable success requires genuine competence, not just political maneuvering. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been petty, emotional, and temporary. This was something better. Systematic justice delivered through patience, preparation, and letting someone's own flaws destroy them. Blake had taught me that corporate politics could be a weapon. I'd simply learned to wield that weapon with precision instead of recklessness. As I reviewed the quarterly reports showing StreamSync's continued success, I realized the most satisfying part wasn't his downfall. It was proving that good work, given time and strategy, will always triumph over stolen credit and empty ambition. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth unfold naturally. The distinction between revenge and justice became clearer as time passed and emotions cooled. Revenge would have involved actively sabotaging Blake's career, or publicly humiliating him in ways that reflected my anger rather than his misconduct. Justice meant creating conditions where truth could emerge naturally and consequences would flow from his own actions rather than my interference. The systematic approach I'd taken, documenting financial irregularities, strengthening my own work, and positioning myself strategically, required discipline and long-term thinking that revenge couldn't sustain. Blake's destruction came from his own choices. The decision to steal credit, the choice to misuse company funds, the arrogance that made him believe he was untouchable. I'd simply ensured that those choices had consequences by removing the protective buffer I'd unknowingly provided throughout our working relationship. The elegance of this approach was its sustainability. Unlike revenge, which creates cycles of retaliation, this justice was final and complete. Blake couldn't blame external enemies for his downfall because it came from within, making any comeback virtually impossible. The truth had indeed unfolded naturally, just with a little strategic assistance from someone who understood how to let it breathe.